Good evening and welcome to the Money Show, the only show of its kind all over India, the show which is dedicated to making all of you richer, your wallets thicker every day. On weekdays, that is, we get financial experts to our studios to answer all of your queries, whether it's on tax, whether it's on personal finance, whether it's on real estate, gold investments, you name it. This is the Money Show. I'm Nantara Rai. I'm going to be with you the next 30 minutes, and today the guest that we've got to our studios is Hemant Rustagi of Wiseinvest Advisors. Hi Hemant, it's the first edition of the Money Show that we're coming to our viewers with after the interim budget of 2019. So much in it for all the constituencies, whether it's the TDS exemption when it comes to housewives, whether it's to do with the all of those earning up to 5 lakh rupees or 6.5 lakh rupees a year, not having to pay any tax at all. And if you hold real estate investments, a big bonanza coming in as far as a tax rebate, as far as notional rental income goes on vacant properties, and of course on the capital gains tax exemption of up to 2 crore rupees. So in some and some, I'm sure you all read about it. The budget fine print has been going on since Friday evening. So let's not waste time and get straight down to the viewer queries. Hemant, thanks so much for joining us here. I'm going to move on to the first query that we've got today. It's coming by email. It's coming from Robert, who writes, are there any changes on the short-term capital gains and the long-term capital gains on shares? Are there any changes in long-term capital gains on sales of property? I have a flat in Mumbai. Hi, Hemant. Good evening. We didn't see much being announced as far as the share market goes, but of course there is a big change for our viewer Robert with reference to any property transaction he may be planning to do with that apartment in Mumbai.
Well, I think let me address the tax benefits, long-term capital gain. Well, I think let me address the tax benefits, long-term capital gain, short-term capital gain as far as the stocks are concerned, as the equities are concerned. Well, I'm afraid there is nothing in the interim budget for any investment in the stocks, so there is absolutely no change in the long-term capital gain as well as short-term capital gain for stocks. As far as the long-term capital gain on real estate is concerned, there is something in it. The rule, what interim budget has now offered is that if there is a capital gain of up to 2 crore, the rollover of that can happen in 2 residential properties. Now, what was happening earlier, that you could buy only 1 house. So now what they've said is that if the capital gain is up to, long-term capital gain up to 2 crore, you can buy 2 houses. But if it exceeds 2 crore, then the previous rule of having to buy only 1 property stands. So that's the change which is coming in as far as the long-term capital gain on real estate is concerned.
So you're basically saying there has been no change in the share market when it comes to the long-term capital gains and the short-term capital gains. But the Finance Minister Piyush Goyal did talk about changing the securities transaction tax with reference to the capital markets. It's only going to apply once and only be collected once at one incidence.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
I was saying that for the share market, no change when it comes to long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains. But we did see an announcement to do with the securities transaction tax with reference to the capital markets. It will only be collected at one incidence and only one point of the transaction. Have I got that right?
I think so, yes. I mean, there was something to that effect. But I think there is some more clarity required on that. We will really come to know in going forward as to how exactly this will happen.
Okay, time now to get the next query on board. I believe it is a live caller that we're getting, Kaushal, our viewer from Dehradun. Good evening, Kaushal. Welcome to the Money Show. How can we help you today?
Madam, we were getting 10,000 rupees as the interest benefit in the income tax from the saving account. Now it has been increased to 40,000 for normal person and 50,000 for the senior citizen. So this rate which we shall be getting only on the savings bank account or even on the fixed deposit interest also.
Hemant, did you hear the query? Kaushal from Dehradun calling in live. What's your advice to him?
Well, let me just clarify here. There is no change on the tax benefit that was being given on 10,000 rupees. Okay, what has been changed now for operational reason is that the TDS threshold on the bank deposit and the post office deposit has been increased from 10,000 to 40,000, which means that currently if you get interest of more than 10,000, there is a TDS applicable by the banks. Now, what will happen now from the next financial year is that if up to 40,000 of interest coming on the bank deposit in the post office, there won't be any TDS. So, like I said earlier, let me just clarify that there is no increase in the exemption limit. It's just that the threshold for TDS on the bank deposit interest has been increased from 10,000 to 40,000.
I hope that one helps you out, and worry not. If you have any follow-up queries, you can keep dialing into the Money Show. We come to you every weekday at 5:30 p.m. You can also email us or send us your queries by Facebook and Twitter. Incidentally, I forgot to point that out. Quick reminder for all of you viewers tuning in, our phone lines are open. The number's on top of your screens. That's a number you've got to call to get free advice today on the Money Show. I'm going to move on to the next query. This one is coming from Surat. It's by email from Rajesh Uttam Motiramani, who writes, I want to know whether the Finance Bill 2019 proposes to enhance the threshold exemption limit of 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakh rupees across the board, or is the IT exemption limit of 5 lakhs that has been proposed for net income below 5 lakhs. That's of course after making all deductions under the relevant sections like ATC, ATD. Hemant, there was a lot of confusion that we did see on the day of the announcement by the interim finance minister Piyush Goyal. But there is no change in tax slabs, right? So there's just 3 crore people which are standing to benefit. That was the big announcement that was made, because if you earn up to 5 lakh rupees a year, you're exempt from any tax.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think let me just clarify that there is no change in the exemption limit. There is no change in the tax slab. What has been given in the interim budget 2019 is that there is a tax exemption, tax rebate of 12,500 for all those taxpayers whose taxable income is up to 5 lakh rupees. So let me just explain what's happening currently is that those who have taxable limit income up to 3.5 lakh get a tax rebate of 2,500. Now that limit has been enhanced to 500,000, and the entire 12,500 tax which is there, you get a rebate. So let me just again explain that. When I'm talking about, I think the key word here is taxable income. It's not the total income, it's the taxable income, which means that if someone claims exemption deductions under section 80C, 80CCC and 80CC1DB and 80D, after all this, if the taxable income is up to 5 lakh, you get a tax rebate of 12,500, which means that you don't pay any tax. But if your taxable limit is more than 5 lakh, even if it is 5 lakh 5,000 or 5 lakh 10,000, everything what is there currently applies to you. The threshold limit, the tax slab, there is absolutely no change. So let me be very clear in the mind of taxpayer that it's only up to, if your taxable income is up to 5 lakh, then you get a tax rebate. So like I said earlier, there is no change in the slab, there is no change in the tax rates.
There is no change in the tax slabs, no change in the tax rates either. But of course, you're going to see that direct tax code which is being repealed, the Income Tax Act which the government wants to repeal, a committee that's been set up, expected to submit its report later this month. Let's see what happens. It's also interim budget 2019, so this is the relief that's coming for the small taxpayers till then. I'm going to move on to the next query, and this is coming in from Mr. Bansali. Yeah, Mr. Bansali, who says that with announcements of real estate and budget, how does the change of recognition in rental help to improve spending power. This is a big, ask, and something the industry has been asking for a while, Hemant, because when anything has to be calculated on a notional basis, it can lead to harassment. That was what industry bodies had been saying. And so is it now understood that if you have a real estate asset, any property which is lying vacant, it has not been let out, you don't have to pay any tax on it anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. There are two issues that have been addressed here. One, there have been disputes in the past where you talked about, the self-occupied property and the property where you're paying, the tax on the notional rent. There have been disputes about that, so I think that has been put to rest. The second thing what has been, given in the interim budget is that if you have two house properties and you can decide which one you want to treat as self-occupied, and the other property where you are actually paying tax on the notional rent earlier, now there won't be any tax on the notional rent. So which clearly means that there is no tax at all whether you're staying in one house or two houses. Like I said, you still have the flexibility of deciding which house you want to treat as self-occupied. The other one can be treated as the second house, but then you don't have to pay any tax on the notional rent. So this will obviously means that there will be additional money available in the hands of taxpayer, which they can either use for consumption or can use for their investment. So clearly this will benefit all those who have more than one houses which have not been given on rent, because once you give it on rent, then it's treated as income from a house property, which obviously the tax treatment is completely different. But if you're not let it out, clearly no tax to be payable now.
And therefore, whatever you don't pay legitimately now as per interim budget 2019, it's money in your pocket. Well, with that, we're going to take a short commercial break. You're watching The Money Show. It's the first such edition after interim budget 2019. Lots of queries coming in. Stay tuned. Our phone lines will be open for another 15 minutes. Welcome back. You're watching The Money Show with me, Nayantara Rao. It's the first edition of The Money Show since interim budget 2019. Have any queries on how the budget impacts your investments? Whether it's your savings account, equities, real estate, gold, feel free to email us. You can send us your queries by Facebook, Twitter, or just call us. The numbers on top of your screen, the phone lines are open for another 10 minutes or so. And just a quick word on the guests that we have today. Every day we get a new guest to our studios. Today is the turn of Hemant Rustagi of Wiseinvest Advisors. I'm going to move straight on and get to your query that we got on email during the break. It's coming from Swati, who writes, if one has earned long-term capital gains from sale of property and gifted the amount to his daughter on her wedding, can long-term capital gains be avoided if her husband and she are buying the property using the gifted amount? So much of this is being talked about when you, at marriages, when you get money or you get inheritance as well. What happens to long-term capital gains is, of course, one of those very specific queries. And, of course, what are the changes that have been made? You've increased that exemption to 2 crores.
Well, clearly, I think as the finance minister said in the budget speech, the focus clearly has been on the affordable housing, and the whole idea of allowing this assumption of having 2 houses on capital gain up to 2 crore is that there have been issues where when you sell an ancestral property and then you have more than one child, so you want to kind of give it to both of them, or so it was obviously difficult because you could buy only you're allowed to buy only one house property. So clearly with this now, if the capital gain is up to 2 crore, you can buy 2 house properties, and so in that case obviously you get a tax exemption there. But like I mentioned earlier, if it is more than 2 crore, in that case the existing rules of having to buy only one property still stand. So clearly the key factor is how much is your capital gain. If the gain is up to 2 crore, you can go ahead and buy 2, so you can kind of gift it to or give it to more than one child.
So let me just get this straight. First, the rule was that if you wanted to reduce your tax burden in the form of long-term capital gains, you had to reinvest it in one property and within 1 year. So what exactly is the change? Now you can invest in 2 properties, exemption is up to 2 crores and it's once in a lifetime, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There were 2 things which you could do. One is to buy another property, and the second was that if you didn't want to buy a property, then you could kind of buy long-term capital gain bonds. There was a limit was 50 lakh, which still stands. But if you wanted to reinvest, then you are allowed to reinvest only in one house property. Now what the interim budget has provided is that if the capital gain, I think it's very important to understand that if the capital gain from the sale of asset is up to 2 crore, then you can buy 2 house properties. But if it is more than 2 crore, then the existing rule of that you can buy only 1 property stands. So clearly, I think it all depends on how much capital gain you have, which you want to reinvest in the house property. And also let me add that this can be done only once in a lifetime. So it's not that every time you sell a house and you can do that. This can be done only once in the lifetime. That's it. So I think it's very important for taxpayers to remember this.
Yes, it's once in a lifetime. This new provision that has been made has been one of the big wish lists from the real estate sector, from H&Is who like to dabble in real estate as well. Moving on, this is a query coming from Girish. I'm planning to sell my property in Bengaluru valued at 40 lakh rupees. I don't have any other source of income. What's my property tax? I'd just like to point out to him that he didn't tell us when he bought this property, how much he's bought it for. We only know how much he wants to sell it for. Would you be able to calculate what would be his tax burden with reference to property tax?
Difficult to say because you need a lot of details for that. One is, at the year in which the property was bought, what is the price at which it was bought, because you also have to apply indexation benefit. So I think all that information will be required to really do some calculation on how much capital gain tax will be there.
So I tell you what, I'm going to ask this viewer to write back to us. Girish, write back to us with more details, and I'll get another expert tomorrow to answer this query for you. But we need to get more inputs from you. Tell us when you bought the property, if you inherited it, things like that. Let's move on to the next query. This is coming from Kamal Gupta, who says, please go through my mutual fund portfolio and advise me if any changes are required in the allocations or even the funds. So he's got a couple of goals, as I can see over here. He wants to save up nearly 1.4 crore rupees. He's a long-term investor for almost 12 to 18 years is what he's provided for us. He wants to save up for a wedding. He wants to save up for his retirement. The funds he's got are Reliance Large Cap. He's got SBI Magnum Multi Cap, HDFC Mid Cap Opportunities, ICICI Pro Blue Chip, Tata Equity Private Equity Fund, and SBI Small Cap Fund. So there you go, 6 in all. Hemant, is 6 a good number? He's putting in roughly 2,500 rupees monthly.
Well, let me begin with the quality of funds in the portfolio. I must say that all the funds that have been chosen here are good quality. So clearly, if you look at the time horizon that is there, and the fact that these have been, I'm assuming that these have been all aligned to different goals, and these are all long-term goals. So clearly, it makes a lot of sense to invest in equity, which is what has been done. And the fund selection is quite good, so can be continued. There is always a debate about as to how many funds you should have in the portfolio, but my belief is that if you align your investment to your different goals, then you need to look at, because it always makes sense to have a separate portfolio or align separate funds for each of the goals, so that it becomes easier for you to monitor, so you know exactly how the portfolio is progressing. So I think looking at the time horizon, investing in equity, great idea. Investing systematically, again, it helps you keep discipline in your investment process, ensure that you're invested at different levels of the market and you benefit from averaging. And like I mentioned earlier, I think the quality of the fund in the portfolio is quite good, and the balance that you want in allocation to different segments of the market, like large cap, mid cap, small cap, I think that again has been achieved. So a good portfolio, he can continue. And now that the budget is out, the focus clearly will be on the general election. So anyone who is investing with a clear goal and clear time horizon in mind, keep an eye on these events. These events can be important, especially for the short term, but it should not affect your long-term investment at all. Because if you're investing for 15, 16 years, there are going to be 3 general elections. Every year you're going to have a budget. So I don't think as an investor, if you're already in the process of investing for a long-term goals, then you should really worry too much about these events.
Okay, so I hope that helps out Kamal. So that's what our expert of the day has to say about your portfolio. If you have any follow-up queries, keep writing into us. With that, we're completely out of time, so I'm going to wrap up this edition of the Money Show. Many thanks for tuning in. And remember, keep the queries coming in. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, with a new expert.